Could self-compassion ever be a bad thing? The short answer is no. The longer answer is also no, but let's talk about some of the most common concerns that come up with this, because it'll help us understand what self-compassion is not. First of all, a common concern is that self-compassion is self-indulgent. You might wonder, will self-compassion make me lazy and weak? No. The definition of self-indulgence is doing exactly what one wants, especially when this involves pleasure or idleness. Self-indulgence would mean you're not willing to invest effort to make meaningful, healthy changes in your way of thinking and acting towards yourself. And that's clearly not the case with self-compassion. The growth that comes from self-compassion requires effort and courage, including making room for some uncomfortable emotions. Self-indulgence is about short-term pleasure. Self-compassion is about doing what's best for our long-term health and well-being. So, self-compassion is not self-indulgent, lazy, or passive. A related misconception is that with self-compassion, you're letting yourself off the hook. Again, no. Self-compassion gives us the safety and strength we need to be able to see and admit our mistakes instead of hiding from them or trying to cover them up. I love this quote from Tara Brach. She said, "Feeling compassion for ourselves in no way releases us from responsibility for our actions. Rather, it releases us from the self-hatred that prevents us from responding to our life with clarity and balance." So, self-compassion gives us the power to own who we are, including our mistakes and shortcomings, and at the same time see more clearly the path for further growth. In fact, research shows that people with higher self-compassion are more likely to take personal responsibility for their actions. For example, they're more likely to apologize if they've offended someone. So, self-compassion is not letting yourself off the hook. Another common thing that comes up is when a person says, "I need to be critical of myself or I won't have the motivation to improve and achieve," or "being hard on myself drives me to succeed." There's actually a lot of research on this, and most people are surprised to learn that self-criticism is actually not an effective motivator. And neither is guilt, by the way. The research on this shows that self-criticism tends to undermine self-confidence and increases fear of failure. So a person is less likely to persist when challenges come up. In contrast, self-compassion increases motivation because we truly care about ourselves and want to reach our full potential. It's having this understanding that we're already fundamentally okay, and at the same time, our personal growth is a beautiful thing. It's the feeling that I am already enough, and I love learning and growing. Self-compassion takes off the heavy chains of feeling like we're not enough and allows our natural growth to proceed unrestrained. And that's exactly what the research shows. People with high self-compassion also have high personal standards. They just don't beat themselves up when they fall short. And they're more likely to persist through challenges because they aren't afraid of failing. Another way to look at this is to think about a favorite mentor or coach or supervisor you've had. This person probably had high expectations for you and could give you pretty direct feedback about what you needed to do better. But you probably also felt and heard from them a sincere interest in your well-being. So you wanted to be your best for them because there was this underlying feeling of care and concern that was really motivating. Contrast that with a boss, and maybe you've had one of these, who's just harsh and critical. People might respond to those hostile tactics in the short term, probably out of fear, but there will be serious consequences for morale and retention, and in the long term, lower success, lower productivity. So self-compassion does not undermine motivation or a person's drive to be better. Okay, one more important misconception to take care of. Some people wonder if self-compassion could be selfish or maybe even narcissistic. No. First of all, let's be sure not to confuse self-compassion with self-esteem. Self-esteem is an evaluation of self-worth, and it relies on a comparison of ourselves relative to other people. And that can get kind of hairy for reasons that Kristen Neff described in her TED Talk, which if you haven't watched yet, definitely go back and do that. Self-compassion isn't an evaluation at all. It's just a way of relating to ourselves with kindness, and it doesn't require any comparisons. It's understanding that we're all human, we're all imperfect, and that I, as a human, being just like everyone else, am just as deserving of the same love and acceptance as any other human. One of the things that can be so beneficial about these practices, especially when we work on this consistently over time, is a kind of softening of this sharp boundary between self and others. We start to see that wall of separateness kind of dissolve to where we naturally respond with compassion to wherever we see a need, whether the need is in ourselves or in others. So living that way is definitely not selfish or narcissistic. And the last thing I'd point out about that is that, especially if you've been someone who's been neglecting compassion toward yourself, all the good benefits that come from doing this will put you in a healthier position to help the people around you, that your self-compassion can actually clear the way for you to have more presence and clarity and emotional resources to benefit the people you interact with. So self-compassion is good for you, and it's also good for everyone else around you. Peace.